Hello, it's Dee Dee again with Safe People by Dr. Henry Cloud and John Townsend. Um, Copyright 95. We're talking about sins against us. So number one, our bonding process was disrupted. We talked about detachment, abandonment, inconsistency, criticism, abuse, grief, and now I'm going to get a little bit more into this first part, which is detachment, someone being emotionally inaccessible to us, I believe. Okay. So these problems can be devastating to the long process of learning to trust God and people. The person who experiences disruption of bonding recoils and withdraws emotionally. He does not experience his need, the hunger for love. Instead, he buries his needs deep inside so he can no longer be hurt. I'm pretty sure that's what happened to my daughter. She felt I wasn't there for her, even though I tried to be, and she pushed me away. And therefore, she does not feel her true hunger for love, her need people. She's like, I don't need anybody. I can do this myself. But yet she bonds very closely to her sister. So she did experience a need for love. She ran to her sister instead of her mother. Okay, well, she got her need met, apparently. And now her sister's moving away. So anyway, yeah. This withdrawal is called defensive devaluation. Defensive devaluation is a protective device that makes love bad, trust unimportant, and people no darn good anyway. People who have been deeply hurt in their relationships will often devalue love so it doesn't hurt so much. And they often become resigned to never loving again. People who are unbonded do funny things in relationships. They don't look for safe people, there's no hunger. They don't recognize safe people, no one is safe. They don't reach out to safe people, why get hurt again? Although unbonded people often have friends and families, their isolation is deep and can cause many serious problems. A person who cannot bond may suffer from addictions, depression, emptiness, excessive caretaking, fear of being treated like an object, fears of closeness, feelings of guilt, feelings of unreality, idealism, lack of joy, loss of meaning, negative bonds, outbursts of anger, panic, shallow relationships, or thought problems such as confusion, distorted thinking, and irrational fears. I would add resentment to that one. I, John, remember being confronted in a growth group at seminary by my peers. They told me something like, thanks for supporting us, but we know nothing of you, and we'd like to. I remember having absolutely nothing to say to these guys. It was as if they had asked me to explain nuclear physics. I stammered something, but it was obvious I had been devaluing what the group could do for me. Are you unbonded? Has your ability to be vulnerable, to be needy, to trust been disrupted? Do you find yourself devaluing safe people? If so, you may need to find a healing settling like a recovery based church or a counselor to deal with your bonding injuries, or a support group, or whatever. Number two, our boundaries were not respected. Our second developmental need is to learn boundaries. Boundaries are our spiritual and emotional property lines. They tell us where we end and where others begin. They help to keep good things in us and bad things out. We take responsibility for what is ours and not for what isn't. When we are clearly defined, we can carry our own loads, and we know when it's appropriate to help others with their burdens. Galatians 6, 1 through 5. Yet our ability to say no can also be sinned against. We can be hurt in our ability to set limits, establish consequences, and not rescue others. Here are some ways our boundaries can be injured. Okay, these are important because I see a lot of this on YouTube, and a lot of this has happened to me from people. So here we go. Aggressive control. Someone hurting us if we say no. Passive control. Someone leaving us if we say no. Regressive control. Guilt messages if we say no. And limitlessness. Someone never saying no to us. These dynamics are common in most relationships and on YouTube, and are extremely destructive to our ability to conduct our lives responsibly. But how do boundary injuries hurt our safety? Basically, if an unbounded person can't take love in, a boundaryless person can't keep love in. I'm going to read that again. If an unbonded person can't take love in, a boundaryless person, a person without boundaries, can't keep love in. Like a cup with no bottom, the grace and care the boundaryless person receives often cannot stay inside to nourish and sustain them. That's where you meet your bottomless pits that never get enough love and constantly want to be told they're loved and valued and adored and supported and encouraged. And you didn't even ask me how I was. You didn't ask me how I was feeling. That's the bottomless pit we're talking about here, the person without boundaries. First, boundaryless people tend to feel abandoned when there is a distance. Because they've often been punished by abandonment, they don't have the ability to stand apart, to be alone, and to hold firm in conflict. So when they're in an argument with a rageaholic who's screaming like a banshee, boundaryless people are cast into a panic state that they must get out of by complying with the wishes of the screamer. Second, boundaryless people tend to isolate as their only limit. Often, people with weak boundaries will give in repeatedly to some irresponsible or demanding person. Then, out of the blue, they'll pack up and leave the relationship with no warning. This is because they were unable to set and keep limits at early stages when there were problems. They didn't have the resources to, at the right time, speak the truth in love. This also destroys our safety. If your boundaries have been injured, you may find that when you are in conflict with someone, you shut down without even being aware of it. This isolates us from love and keeps us from taking in safe people. Kate had been quite controlled by her overprotective mother. She'd always been warned that she was sickly, would get hit by cars, and didn't know how to care for herself well. So she fulfilled all those prophecies. Having no sense of strong boundaries, Kate had great difficulty taking risks and connecting with people. The only safe people were at her home. Finally, however, with a supportive church group, Kate set limits on her time with her mom, made friends in her singles group, and stayed connected to her new spiritual family. People who have trouble with boundaries may exhibit the following symptoms: blaming others, codependency, depression, difficulties with being alone, disorganization, and lack of direction, extreme dependency, feelings of being let down, feelings of obligation, generalized anxiety, identity confusion, impulsiveness, inability to say no, isolation, masochism, over-responsibility and guilt, panic, passive-aggressive behavior, procrastination and inability to follow through, resentment, substance abuse and eating disorders, thought problems, and obsessive-compulsive problems, under responsibility and victim mentality. Yes, we know people on YouTube that are like this, for sure. They just need to learn boundaries. They need to learn to set them and respect other people's. Number 3, we were not seen as whole people with good and bad habits and traits. Our third developmental need is the ability to resolve the split between goodness and badness. After we answer, who loves me, bonding, and who am I, boundaries, we need to know, am I good or bad? We all have a problem in this area. Again, I hate when he generalizes. No, we do not all have a problem in this area. Some of us have a problem in this area. We weren't intended to be bad, but in many ways we are. We all long to be back in the garden in a state of unbroken love with God and others. Again, we can be in that state of unbroken love with God if we have accepted him, his son, his love, his grace, his mercy. This dude is like living in sin land here. Coming to terms with badness involves great loss and struggle for us. Paul echoes this anguish in his cry, for what I want to do, I do not do, but what I hate, I do. Romans 7:15. There is a bee in here, and it's chasing me. Sorry, guys. I'm freaking out. Get your hat out, honey, please.
No.
Why?
You need to get stung.
No, I really don't. I think I got stung on the leg today.
Where is it?
I don't know. I just heard it flying around my head. Like right near my flipping ear. I don't know where it went. I'll let you know if I see it or hear it again, though. Okay, can you get off my computer, dude? I'm in the middle of a live private broadcast here that I'm eventually going to post. Dude, you're not doing your job getting the bees out of here. All right.
Trying.
No, not you, honey. The cat. Usually cats like to swat them and kill them, but not these ones. Okay, Russian blues are too good for that, apparently. I'm just hoping we get it before we go to sleep tonight. Otherwise, I'm going to be flipping out if I hear buzzing and stuff around my head. I'll be sleeping under the darn covers. No, it was a bee. I know the difference in the sound. All right, back to my reading. Sorry, guys. Okay, Paul echoes this anguish in his cry. For what I want to do, I do not do. What I hate, I do. Romans 7:15. He understood that even as Christians, we will still sin, struggle, and fail. All the good intentions, commitment, and willpower in the world won't change that reality. Okay, not true. If you have a relationship with God, you will not perpetually sin. Okay, you won't. All right. Resolving good-bad issues is something God never had to do in himself. He had no badness to contend with. However, he had to come up with solutions for his fallen human race. That's what makes Christianity unique. We have a perfect God dying for a sinful people. Even more incredible is sinful people doesn't have to be good to be loved. We can be bad and still be loved, just as the prodigal son was. Luke 15:11-32. But many of us have learned that we are not loved when we're bad. Okay, you can be loved when you're doing things wrong, but if you're in a perpetual state of doing evil things, no, I don't believe that God loves sin. Now, people can fight me on that and do the whole, well, God loved the world. He gave his only begotten son. So he loved everybody and he always loves everybody. Love, love, love. Some people call that sloppy agape. That's what I call it. No, I think there is a limit. There is a verse in the Bible that says God reaches an enough point. When you have sinned and done things wrong all your life and you've persecuted his people and you've probably murdered people and done horrid things, I think there's a limit. I don't know what that limit is, but God does. So don't play him for a fool either. I think there's limits. Injuries in this area occur in 4 ways. Perfectionism, others expecting us to have no faults. Idealization, others denying our imperfections. Shaming, others condemning our negative qualities. Splitting, others seeing us as all good or all bad. Again, this comes with narcissism. All these things they're talking about. These relational patterns are in significant relationships can create a dedicated perfectionist fully committed to the concept that she can and must eradicate any negative traits. And now, perfectionists stay caught in Romans 7, never being able to internalize the truth of the next chapter. Therefore, there is now no condemnation for those who are in Christ Jesus. Romans 8:1. They don't have enough grace inside to experience forgiveness. It's what you hear me say a lot when people say, you should be ashamed of yourself or shame on you. There is therefore now no condemnation because I'm in him, okay? I'm cool with God. I'm cool with Jesus. I'm cool with the powers that be. And no, your shame does not stick to me. It will not come to me unless I deserve it. And I rarely deserve shame. Conviction, maybe? Yes, not shame, though. All right. So if you want to say you should be convicted or you should feel convicted, and it's something that I need to feel convicted for, then I'll receive it. But don't try to put your shame on me because shame is not of God and I don't receive it. And you're just wasting your typing and your breath. All right. Next. Good, bad problems are major destroyers. People who can't reconcile either their own or anyone else's faults suffer tremendous isolation because they're unable to attach to real whole people who are both good and bad. The ideals of what should be get in the way. Perfectionists demand that their friends be perfect initially when they click with someone. They will experience a wonderful honeymoon period full of discoveries about all the things we have in common and how compatible they are. Then a conflict will arise. They will start to see the other person's faults. They're always late. They don't listen well. They're too controlling. Suddenly, the perfectionists are confused and disappointed. Someone they believed in, hoped for, expected more from, has seriously let them down, and they tend to leave and re-enter the fruitless, futile search for the ideal. Since safe people aren't perfect people, they are disqualified, and the perfectionist goes on alone. In some cases, perfectionists may forgive other people's sins, but be unable to receive forgiveness themselves. Many perfectionists will sabotage potentially good relationships for one reason, being found out. They are afraid to get too close to someone because their bad self might start leaking out, and the shame and self-condemnation they feel is unbearably painful. Generally, perfectionists opt for isolation rather than to be exposed in their failings. It is sadly ironic that perfectionists shun the very safety that could heal them. The well-known commitment-phobic man is often in this category, or woman. He starts he's the type who starts a relationship, gets close, and then disappears. As a single woman friend of mine said after one of these episodes, I'd understand it if he bailed out after a fight, but on our last date, we both started sharing our fears and insecurities. Silly me, I thought they tended to bring people closer together. What actually happened to the man was just the opposite. He started trusting my friend. His defenses began slipping. His need for being understood, known, forgiven, and comforted, as Paul talks about 2 Corinthians 1:4, was showing, and he couldn't tolerate the risk that his bad self would be too bad, too noxious for my friend. So he took the only route he had taken for years. He ran away. If you have this good-bad split, you may suffer from depression, all good or all bad thinking about yourself or others, anxiety or panic, broken relationships, eating disorders, substance abuse problems, guilt, idealism, inability to tolerate badness, inability to tolerate negative feelings, inability to tolerate weakness, narcissism, perfectionism, rage and anger problems, self-image problems, and sexual addictions. I'm going to read this last one, and then I think I'm going to give it a break for a little while. Yeah, probably the last one will do. Nope, you know what? I'm just going to stop there, I think, because, gosh, I can't decide. Okay, I'm just going to read this last one. We're going to go with number 4, because this is kind of a group of things. 1 to 4, 1 to 4. This is number 4, the last one for this part. We were not allowed to mature into adults. This is important because there is definitely a lot of this on YouTube, I can tell you that, and all over the internet for that matter. Our last developmental need deals with the task of taking on an adult role in life. It is moving from the child's one-down position to the equal and mutual position of being a grown-up. Hey, honey, are you still in here?
Yeah.
Okay, this is a good one for you to listen to because you were struggling with this at one point. All of us start off life as an untrained, immature infant. We have unformed values, gifts, and talents, emotions, and potentials. Primary job of parenting is to help us mature this confusing mass of thoughts and feelings into an adult who's able to function independently. Being an adult means taking our own roles in life, developing specialties and expertise in our jobs and careers, taking on our gender and sexuality roles, coming to terms with what we believe about life, relationships, God, finances, and all the complex issues of life. How can we be sinned against in our need to become adults? Here are some ways. One-up relationships, others who treat us as if we were children. One-down relationships, others who treat us as if we were parents. Control, others who need to be in charge of our lives. Criticism, others who attack when we challenge their. When our emerging adultness is disrupted, we encounter breakdowns in functioning. For example, some people become compliant, obsessive, rule-bound individuals. Some react and become domineering, controlling parental types themselves. And some become rebellious, resisting authority figures long beyond their teenage years. None of these positions solve the problem of becoming a grown-up. They are compromises in character development. How does the adult injured individual suffer from safety problems? In major ways, but the common denominator is this. They're unable to relate to safe people because safe people encourage adultness. They tend to bring out the best in us because love believes all things, 1 Corinthians 13:7. And that's risky because we might just start acting like the adult our friends see inside of us. In other words, the adult injured person is terrified of moving out of the child role, mainly because they were repressed by authority figures and fear criticism. Even though they resent authority, they are afraid of challenging it, and safe relationships create the possibility of a frightening power shift and subsequent conflict. Bruce, a friend of mine, was part of a successful family business. The operation had been started by his father many years ago, and now he and his brother were the heirs apparent. The family members worked well together, and the work progressed smoothly. That is until Bruce's father would subtly put Bruce's ideas down in public and in private. When it was quite bright, would generate a new direction for the firm, his father would smile knowingly and actually pat him on the head in a patronizing fashion. This communicated to everyone that Dad still saw this 34-year-old son as a little boy. Bruce began distancing himself from his family, trying to find a way to get some respect. He developed golfing relationships with some independently minded businessmen who listened to him as a peer. For the first time in his life, Bruce began feeling like an adult. Then the roof fell in. Bruce's dad pulled in the reins and basically told him to get back in the family functions and drop his good-for-nothing friends, or he'd be cut off from the family and business both. Obviously, Bruce's dad had sensed his son had started to be a grown-up, and he wasn't about to let that happen. Sadly enough, it didn't happen. The ultimatum was too soon for Bruce to use his support system to become an adult. So Bruce gave in. He stopped seeing his buddies, stopped bringing up his new ideas, and stopped attempting to be a man. He had bouts of depression since then, but he has been reluctant to get help. Bruce's conflicts in becoming an adult kept him from safety. He was only able to relate to people who treated him like a little boy. As with the other 3 areas of development, authority problems can cause a whole host of symptoms, such as anxiety, black and white thinking, competitiveness, compulsive behaviors, sexual addiction, substance abuse problems, dependency, depression, fears of disapproval, fears of failure, feelings of inferiority, feelings of superiority, guilt, hatred of authority, idealization of authority, romanticism or romanticization of childhood, impulse problems, and inhibition, needs for approval, judgmentalism, loss of power, need for permission, no equality between people, rage or passive-aggressive behavior, parenting others, sexual dysfunction, and you can't do that attitude. Okay, so that's what that one leads to. And yeah, so I'm going to stop there. And I will read the rest of it on the next videotape because this has gone long enough. But thank you for listening to Safe People Chapter 4. And I welcome discussion and comments and agreements and disagreements and input of all kinds. All right. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.